I stood frozen in the marble foyer of the Pemberton Hotel in Manhattan, champagne flute trembling in my hand, as my husband Derek threw his head back and laughed at the cruelest joke I'd ever heard at my expense. His college friend Marcus had just called me a kept woman, a trophy wife, someone who contributed nothing but her presence to Derek's success, and instead of defending me, my husband of 8 years joined in the mockery as if it were the most hilarious observation anyone had ever made. What none of them knew, what Derek himself had somehow managed to forget or willfully ignore, was that I owned 90% of Hartwell Technologies, the company he strutted around claiming as his own empire, and tonight, that comfortable delusion was about to shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The charity gala buzzed with Manhattan's elite, all designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, the kind of event where business deals happened over canapes and reputations could be built or destroyed between the salad and main course. I had chosen a midnight blue Valentino gown for the evening, elegant but understated. My dark hair swept into a classic chignon, diamond earrings catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. I'd learned over the years to present myself as Derek preferred, beautiful, polished, silent, the perfect accessory to his carefully constructed image of a self-made tech mogul. If you're enjoying this story so far, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button right now. Your support means everything to this channel. Derek stood at the center of a small crowd, his 6'2" frame commanding attention in his custom Tom Ford suit, his sandy hair perfectly styled, his confident smile the same one that had first attracted me 10 years ago when we met at a Columbia Business School mixer. Back then, he'd been charming and ambitious, full of ideas but short on capital. I'd been the one with the trust fund, the business acumen my father had drilled into me since childhood, and the vision to see potential where others saw risk. "Come on, Marcus. Don't be ridiculous," Derek said, still chuckling as he clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Claire keeps herself busy with charity work and decorating our various properties. She's excellent at picking out curtains." The group erupted in laughter. I recognized most of them. Business associates, competitors, journalists from tech publications who could make or break a company's reputation with a single article. My cheeks burned, but I maintained my composure, years of private school and finishing classes kicking in automatically. "Never let them see you sweat," my mother used to say. "Never give them the satisfaction of knowing they've wounded you." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Marcus continued, emboldened by Derek's response and the attention of the crowd. "You built that company from nothing, Derek. Hartwell Technologies wouldn't exist without your genius, your 14-hour days, your innovation. Meanwhile, she shops on Fifth Avenue and lunches with other society wives. It's the oldest story in New York, man. Trophy wife marries successful husband, lives the good life." I took a sip of my champagne, the bubbles bitter on my tongue, and calculated. 8 years ago, when Derek had come to me with his revolutionary idea for cloud-based security software, I'd believed in him. More than that, I'd believed in us. I'd written the first check for my trust fund, $2 million to get the company off the ground. Then another $3 million 6 months later when we hit development challenges. Then another $5 million when we needed to scale faster than our revenue could support. But I hadn't just been a silent investor throwing money at Derek's dream. I'd negotiated the contracts with our first major clients. I'd structured the deals that brought in venture capital while allowing us to maintain control. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. reviewing financial projections, refining pitch decks, identifying market opportunities that Derek's engineering-focused mind had overlooked. And when we'd incorporated Hartwell Technologies, I'd made sure the paperwork reflected reality. 90% ownership in my name, 10% in Derek's. It had seemed reasonable at the time. My money, my business expertise, my connections had built the foundation. Derek contributed his technical brilliance and would run daily operations as CEO. We'd been partners in every sense of the word, or so I'd thought. Somewhere along the way, as the company grew from a startup in our spare bedroom to a $200 million enterprise with offices in 3 countries, Derek had started believing his own press releases. The articles that called him a visionary. The awards that named him Entrepreneur of the Year. The speaking engagements where he told the story of Hartwell Technologies as if he'd conjured it from thin air through sheer force of will. "You know, I read that profile about you in Forbes," said Jennifer Watts, a journalist from TechCrunch whom I recognized from previous events. "They called you the boy genius of cybersecurity. Is it true you started the company in your living room with just a laptop and a dream?" Derek's chest puffed up visibly. "It's true. I saw a gap in the market. Knew I could develop better security protocols than anything available, and I just went for it. Took massive risks, maxed out my credit cards, lived on ramen for months. But I believed in the vision." I nearly choked on my champagne. Maxed out his credit cards? The man hadn't paid for a meal with his own money since we'd started dating. The living room he referenced was in the penthouse apartment my trust fund had purchased. And the only ramen Derek had ever eaten was at that trendy Japanese place in Soho that charged $35 a bowl. If this story is resonating with you, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and help us grow our community. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your click makes all the difference. "What about you, Claire?" Jennifer turned to me suddenly, her smile professional but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "What's it like being married to one of New York's most successful entrepreneurs? Do you ever feel overshadowed?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Derek cut me off smoothly. "Claire's my biggest supporter," he said, pulling me close with an arm around my waist that felt more possessive than affectionate. "She understands that building an empire requires sacrifice. She's content with her role. Content with my role." The words echoed in my head like a death knell. When had I become content with being erased? When had I stopped correcting the narrative, stopped insisting on credit for my contributions? I could pinpoint the moment, actually. 3 years ago, at a similar event, when I tried to join a conversation about our company's expansion strategy, and Derek had smiled indulgently and suggested I go powder my nose while the adults talked business. I'd been so shocked, so hurt, that I'd actually done it. And then it had happened again. And again. Each time I'd stayed silent, thinking we'd address it later in private, thinking Derek would remember who'd made everything possible. But later never came, and Derek's memory proved remarkably selective. "I wouldn't call myself content," I said now, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. "I'd say I'm observant." Derek's arm tightened around my waist, a warning. "Claire." "No, I'm curious," Marcus interjected, his bourbon clearly giving him courage. "What exactly do you observe from your position? What's it like watching success happen from the outside?" The outside. The phrase crystallized something inside me, a decision I hadn't fully realized I'd made until this moment. I'd spent 8 years on the outside of my own success story, watching Derek claim credit, watching him rewrite history, watching him transform from the man I'd loved into someone I'd barely recognized. Someone who could stand in a room full of people and mock the woman who'd built his empire. Someone who could laugh when others diminished her. Someone who'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly appreciated, everything she'd sacrificed. "I observe quite a lot," I said, extracting myself from Derek's grip and turning to face the group. "For instance, I've observed how short memory can be in the tech world. How quickly people forget that every successful person stands on someone else's shoulders." "Here we go," Derek muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Too much champagne." "I've had exactly 1 glass, darling," I replied, my voice honey-sweet and razor-sharp. "I'm perfectly clear-headed. In fact, I'm seeing things more clearly than I have in years." Jennifer's phone had appeared in her hand, I noticed. Journalist instincts kicking in, sensing a story. Good. Let her record this. Let them all witness it. "Claire, this isn't the time or place," Derek said, his jaw tight, his hand reaching for my arm. I stepped back, out of reach. "Really? Because it seems like the perfect time and place. You've spent the last hour regaling everyone with tales of your singular genius, your lone wolf journey from nobody to tech titan. You've basked in their admiration, accepted their congratulations, positioned yourself as the sole architect of Hartwell Technologies. And when your friend calls me a kept woman, you laugh. You actually laugh." The crowd had grown, I realized. Other guests were drifting over, drawn by the shift in atmosphere, the electric tension that preceded either spectacular entertainment or catastrophic disaster. Someone's going to get this on video, I thought distantly. It'll probably go viral. Derek will hate that. The thought brought me unexpected satisfaction. Press that subscribe button if you want to see where this story goes. We're building something special here, and we'd love for you to be part of our journey to 1,000 subscribers. You're being dramatic, Derek said, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now, a flicker of something that might have been fear. Everyone knows you've been supportive. No one's questioning that. Supportive, I repeated, tasting the word like poison. What an interesting way to describe writing $10 million in checks. Or is it more than that now? I lose track of how much of my money has funded your lifestyle. The silence was immediate and total. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to sense the moment and let their music fade. Derek's face had gone pale beneath his carefully maintained tan, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Claire," he said quietly, desperately. "Not here. We can discuss this at home." "We've never discussed it at home," I countered. "I've tried. You change the subject, dismiss my concerns, tell me I'm being emotional or irrational or that I don't understand how business works. But I understand perfectly, Derek. I have an MBA from Wharton, remember? The degree my father paid for while your community college transcripts were gathering dust? I understand business very well." "Ms. Hartwell," Jennifer said, and I noticed her use of my maiden name, the name that was actually on all the corporate documents. "Are you saying you have a financial stake in Hartwell Technologies?" "I'm saying I am Hartwell Technologies," I replied, my voice steady and clear. 90% ownership. It's all documented, registered, legally binding. Derek has 10% and a salary as CEO. A very generous salary that I approved, by the way. Plus bonuses, stock options, and apparently an unlimited expense account he's used to wine and dine half of Manhattan while telling everyone he's a self-made man. Derek's face had progressed from pale to scarlet. "You signed a prenuptial agreement stating you wouldn't discuss our financial arrangements publicly." "I signed a prenuptial agreement protecting my assets in case of divorce," I corrected. "I signed nothing preventing me from correcting blatant lies about my own company. And for the record, Derek, claiming sole credit for something you didn't build? Standing by while others mock your wife as a useless ornament. Those feel an awful lot like grounds for revisiting the terms of our marriage and your employment." The crowd had swelled to at least 50 people now, all pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. I saw phones out everywhere, recording, photographing, probably live tweeting. Tomorrow morning, this would be everywhere. The gossip columns, the business press, probably even the mainstream news. Tech mogul exposed as fraud by wife, who actually built his empire. I could write the headlines myself. "You're going to regret this," Derek hissed, stepping closer, his hand gripping my upper arm hard enough to bruise. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're destroying everything we've built." "Everything I built," I said, not bothering to lower my voice. "And I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply clarifying ownership. The company will be fine. Better than fine, actually, once we make some leadership changes." His grip tightened painfully. "Leadership changes?" "Well, yes," I said, looking pointedly at his hand on my arm until he released it. "I've been reviewing the quarterly reports. Did you think I didn't notice the discrepancies? The private jet charters to Vegas that weren't business trips? The company credit card charges at jewelry stores for gifts I never received? The consulting fees paid to that marketing firm that, interestingly enough, is run by your ex-girlfriend from college. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Just click that button and join our community of listeners who appreciate real stories about real people." Derek's expression shifted from anger to panic. Those were legitimate business expenses. "I'm sure the forensic accountant I hired last month will determine that," I replied calmly, "along with determining whether any of those expenses constitute fraud, embezzlement, or breach of fiduciary duty. I believe there's also the matter of the side deal you tried to negotiate with Silvertech Industries without board approval. That would be my approval, since I am the board." "How did you know about Silvertech?" The words escaped before Derek could stop them, confirmation in a question. I know everything, Derek. I've always known everything. I just stopped pretending not to notice because it was easier than confronting the fact that my husband had become someone I don't recognize. Someone who'd rather steal from the company his wife built than admit he needs help. Someone who'd rather live a lie than share credit. Someone who could hear me called a kept woman and find it amusing. Jennifer was typing furiously on her phone. Other journalists in the crowd were doing the same. This was going to be the tech story of the year, possibly the decade. Young female entrepreneur reveals she's the real power behind multi-million-dollar company, while husband took all the credit. The think pieces practically wrote themselves. We need to talk about this privately, Derek said, his voice low and urgent. You're upset, I understand that. You have every right to be upset. But making a scene at a charity gala isn't going to help anything. I disagree, I said pleasantly. I think making a scene at a charity gala full of journalists and industry leaders is exactly what will help. Because now everyone knows the truth. Now, when you walk into a board meeting or take a meeting with investors or give an interview about your visionary leadership, they'll know. They'll remember this night. They'll remember that Derek Pemberton didn't build Hartwell Technologies. His wife did. While he was busy playing tech mogul, Claire Hartwell was the one actually running the empire. Claire Hartwell. Marcus spoke up, his earlier bravado completely deflated. Your name is on the company? My name is the company, I confirmed. Hartwell Technologies. Named after my family, funded by my money, built on my business strategy. Derek contributed his technical expertise, which I compensated him for generously. But the company? The success? The $200 million valuation? That's mine. Jesus Christ, someone in the crowd muttered. She's the Hartwell? I told you she looked familiar, someone else whispered. Claire Hartwell. Her father is Richard Hartwell, Hartwell Industries, one of the wealthiest families in New York. And she let everyone think she was just the pretty wife, Jennifer said, her voice a mixture of admiration and disbelief.
Why?
Why would you let him take credit for all of this? It was the question I'd been asking myself for 3 years, the question that had kept me awake countless nights, the question that had driven me to therapy and meditation, and every self-help book promising to restore lost confidence. Why had I made myself small? Why had I allowed my accomplishments to be erased? Why had I stood silently by while Derek rewrote our history? If you're finding this story compelling, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe. Every new subscriber helps us continue bringing you these authentic stories, and we're working hard to reach that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Because I loved him, I said simply, surprised by the emotion that crept into my voice. Because when we started, we were partners. Real partners. And I thought that's what marriage meant, supporting each other, celebrating each other's success as shared success. I didn't care who got the public credit as long as we both knew the truth. But somewhere along the way, Derek started believing the fiction. He forgot it was fiction. Or maybe he just decided his version of events was more convenient. That's not fair, Derek protested weakly. I never forgot what you contributed. Really? Because about 6 months ago, you told a reporter from Business Insider that your wife was your good luck charm. A good luck charm, Derek. Like a rabbit's foot or a 4-leaf clover. Something decorative and meaningless that you carried around for superstitious reasons. Not your business partner. Not your financial backer. Not the majority owner of your company. A good luck charm. I was being romantic, he said desperately. It was a compliment. It was erasure. I corrected. It was reducing everything I built to a cute anecdote about the supportive wife. And tonight, when Marcus called me a kept woman and you laughed, that was the moment I realized you weren't going to change. You're not going to suddenly remember what I contributed. You're not going to start sharing credit or acknowledging my role. You've rewritten history so thoroughly in your own mind that you actually believe you built this company alone. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Derek looked around at the crowd, seeming to realize for the first time how many people were watching, recording, witnessing his humiliation. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time, the self-made tech genius revealed as a man who'd married money and claimed credit for his wife's work. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's your endgame here, Claire?" "I want my company back," I said clearly. "I want my identity back. I want the truth acknowledged publicly. And I want a divorce." The last word hung in the air like a bomb. Someone gasped. Phones clicked, capturing the moment. Jennifer was practically vibrating with journalistic excitement. "You can't be serious," Derek said. "You're going to throw away 8 years of marriage because of some stupid jokes?" "I'm ending 8 years of marriage because you've shown me exactly who you are," I replied. "Someone who'd rather destroy me than share the spotlight. Someone who values his ego more than his wife. Someone who's been embezzling from the company, lying to investors, and apparently conducting an affair with his ex-girlfriend on the company dime. Did I miss anything?" Derek's face confirmed what my private investigator had suspected. The trips to Vegas hadn't been for gambling. They'd been rendezvous with Melissa Chen, his college girlfriend who'd conveniently reappeared in his life 2 years ago with a struggling marketing consultancy and flexible morals. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I countered. "Would it change anything? Would you suddenly remember that I built this company? Would you stop stealing from it? Would you end the affair?" He said nothing, which was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive a letter from my attorneys. It will outline the terms of our divorce, which, thanks to the prenuptial agreement you mentioned earlier, will be quite straightforward. It will also outline your termination as CEO of Hartwell Technologies, effective immediately." "You can't fire me," Derek said automatically. "I absolutely can," I replied. "I'm the majority owner. I'm the board. I'm everything. You serve at my pleasure, and your employment agreement includes a morality clause that you've violated spectacularly. The embezzlement alone is grounds for termination with cause, which means no golden parachute, no severance package, no stock options. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking that button right now. If you're invested in this story, you'll want to subscribe to catch all our content. You'll destroy the company's reputation," Derek tried. "Investors will panic. Stock prices will crash. Stock prices will adjust temporarily and then recover when I announce new leadership," I said. "I've already lined up a replacement CEO. Sandra Martinez from Quantum Systems has agreed to come aboard. She's brilliant, experienced, and most importantly, she's not actively embezzling from a company or sleeping with consultants on company time." "This is insane," Derek said, looking around at the crowd as if seeking allies. "You're all witnessing this. She's having some kind of breakdown. This isn't rational." "Actually, this is the most rational I've been in years," I said. "The irrational part was staying silent while you erased me. The irrational part was making excuses for your behavior. The irrational part was hoping you'd somehow remember who I was and what I'd done for you. This is me finally reclaiming my life and my legacy." "I'll fight this," Derek promised, his voice hardening. "I'll fight the divorce, fight the termination, fight everything. I'll drag you through court for years." "You'll lose," I said simply. "I have documentation for everything. Bank records showing my investment. Corporate filings showing my ownership. Your expense reports showing your fraud. Text messages between you and Melissa that my investigator subpoenaed from the phone company. You can fight if you want, but you'll lose, and you'll only make everything more public and more humiliating for yourself." I watched the realization dawn on his face. He'd been caught, completely and thoroughly. There was no spin, no narrative control, no way to rewrite this story. The truth was out, documented, witnessed by dozens of people with cameras and platforms and audiences hungry for exactly this kind of drama. "I gave you everything," Derek said, and there was genuine bewilderment in his voice, as if he truly believed it. "I gave you this life, this status, access to this world. You would have been nothing without me." And there it was, the real belief underlying everything. Derek genuinely thought he'd done me a favor by allowing me to fund his dreams. He genuinely believed that marriage to him had elevated me, rather than the other way around. He'd constructed a reality in which he was the prize, the catch, the benefactor, and I was the lucky woman who'd won his attention. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "I would have been nothing without you. I would have been Claire Hartwell, daughter of Richard Hartwell, MBA from Wharton, successful entrepreneur in my own right. Instead, I became Claire Pemberton, decorative wife, good luck charm, kept woman. But that ends tonight." I set down my champagne flute on a nearby table and pulled off my wedding ring, the 4-carat diamond Derek had chosen, charging it to what he didn't realize was essentially my credit card. I held it out to him. "I don't want this," he said automatically. "Neither do I," I replied. "Consider it part of your severance package. You'll need it. Finding a new job is going to be difficult once word gets out about the embezzlement and the affair and the fraud. You might want to pawn it." He didn't take the ring, so I set it on the table next to my champagne flute. Then I turned to address the crowd, all those faces watching with mixtures of shock and fascination and, in some cases, barely concealed delight at witnessing such spectacular drama. "I apologize for the scene," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. This wasn't the venue I would have chosen for these revelations, but sometimes the truth demands immediate attention. For those of you in the industry, I want to assure you that Hartwell Technologies is strong, stable, and will continue to thrive under new leadership. For those of you in the press, I'll be releasing a formal statement tomorrow morning that clarifies the ownership structure and addresses the leadership transition. And for those of you who might be wondering whether you should believe me or Derek, I invite you to review the public corporate filings. It's all there, documented and legal and truthful. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel before you go. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us bring you more stories like this one. I looked back at Derek one last time. He stood frozen, diminished somehow despite his height and expensive suit. The confident tech mogul had vanished, replaced by a man who just realized he'd lost everything because he couldn't see past his own ego. "Goodbye, Derek," I said. "I genuinely hope you land on your feet. But you'll do it on your own merit this time, not on my money or my connections or my business acumen. Consider it character building." I walked away then, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my head high, my spine straight. The crowd parted for me like water, and I could feel every eye tracking my progress across the ballroom and out into the cool October night. My driver was waiting with a car, my real car, the one I'd bought with my own money, not the flashy Tesla Derek insisted on for appearances. "Home, Miss Hartwell?" Charles asked, using my maiden name as I'd instructed him to start doing last week when I'd realized this confrontation was inevitable. "Home," I confirmed. "And Charles? Tomorrow we're going to the office bright and early. I have a company to run." The next morning, I woke up in the penthouse I'd owned before I met Derek, the one I'd kept in my name despite his suggestions that we sell it, and by something we'd chosen together. I'd always kept it as a safety net, though I'd framed it as an investment property. Now I was grateful for that instinct. My phone showed 217 missed calls and 463 text messages. I ignored all of them except the one from my attorney confirming that Derek had been served the divorce papers and termination letter at 6 a.m. before he could try to access any company accounts or take any preemptive action. The news had spread faster than I'd anticipated. By the time I arrived at Hartwell Technologies headquarters in Midtown, there were 3 news vans parked outside and a cluster of reporters waiting at the entrance. I'd prepared for this, dressed in a power suit the color of burgundy wine, my hair styled professionally, my makeup flawless. Claire Pemberton, decorative wife, had stayed home. Claire Hartwell, CEO and founder of Hartwell Technologies, had shown up to work. "Ms. Hartwell, is it true you've been the secret owner all along?" a reporter shouted. "It wasn't a secret," I replied calmly. "It's been public record since we incorporated. Anyone who bothered to look at the corporate filings would have seen it. The only secret was how thoroughly I'd been erased from the narrative." "What do you say to accusations that you're trying to steal your husband's company?" "I say it's impossible to steal what already belongs to you," I responded. Derek was an employee, a well-compensated employee with equity, but an employee nonetheless. And like any employee who commits fraud and violates their employment contract, he's been terminated. Subscribe now if you want to hear how this story ends. We're building an incredible community here, and we'd love for you to be part of reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Will you prosecute him for the alleged embezzlement? I paused, considering. That depends on whether he chooses to fight the divorce and termination quietly or publicly. I'm prepared to be generous if he's reasonable. If he's not, well, I have extensive documentation, and I'm not afraid to use it. Inside the building, the staff was waiting. I could see the uncertainty on their faces, the questions they were too professional to ask aloud. These were good people, talented people who'd worked hard to make Hartwell Technologies successful. They deserved honesty. I called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Standing at the front, looking out at the 150 employees who'd helped build my dream, I felt more myself than I had in years. I know you're all confused and concerned, I began. You've spent years thinking Derek Pemberton was the founder and driving force of this company. I allowed that misconception to persist for personal reasons that, in hindsight, were misguided. But I want you to know the truth now. I founded Hartwell Technologies 8 years ago with my own capital and my own vision. Derek contributed his technical expertise and managed operations, and I'm grateful for those contributions. However, he is not and has never been the owner or true leader of this organization. I let that sink in, watching faces process the information. Derek's employment has been terminated for cause, I continued. I won't go into details publicly, but those who need to know the specifics will be briefed privately. Sandra Martinez will be joining us as the new CEO starting Monday. Until then, I'll be handling day-to-day operations personally. I want to assure all of you that your jobs are secure, your projects will continue, and Hartwell Technologies is stronger than ever. A hand went up in the back. Jennifer Chun, one of our senior developers. Ms. Hartwell, why didn't you tell us before? Why let Derek take all the credit? Because I made the mistake of thinking it didn't matter, I said honestly. I thought that as long as the company succeeded, as long as we were building something great together, the public credit didn't matter. I was wrong. Credit matters. Recognition matters. The truth matters. And I hope all of you, particularly the women in this room, will learn from my mistake. Don't make yourself small. Don't erase your own accomplishments. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. The applause started slowly, then built, echoing off the glass walls of the conference room. It was cathartic, healing, the beginning of reclaiming not just my company but my identity. The next few weeks were intense. Derek did try to fight initially, hiring an expensive legal team and threatening to drag everything out in court. But when my attorneys showed his lawyers the evidence of embezzlement, the affair conducted on company time and resources, and the near miss with a Silvertech deal that could have cost the company millions, his resistance crumbled. We settled the divorce quickly and quietly. He kept his 10% equity in the company, which was still worth a substantial amount, but everything else reverted to me. The penthouse, the cars, the vacation properties that had all been purchased with my money in my name anyway. Sandra Martinez proved to be everything I'd hoped as CEO. She brought fresh perspectives, streamlined operations, and most importantly, she gave credit where credit was due. Under her leadership, with me as active chairman of the board, Hartwell Technologies grew 20% in the first quarter alone. The media attention was intense, but largely positive. I became the reluctant face of a movement, women entrepreneurs who'd been erased or overshadowed, sharing their own stories. I gave interviews to Forbes, Fortune, TechCrunch, and the Wall Street Journal, not to air grievances, but to talk about the importance of women claiming their space in business, of partnership being real partnership, of success being honestly attributed. If this story has moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, please subscribe to our channel. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love for you to help us reach that milestone. Derek largely disappeared from public view. He tried to start a consulting business, but his reputation had taken too much damage. Eventually, I heard he'd moved to California and taken a position as CTO at a mid-sized tech company. I hoped, genuinely, that he'd learned something from the experience, that he'd emerged humbled, more honest, more appreciative of collaboration and partnership. But that wasn't my concern anymore. 6 months after the gala, I ran into Marcus, Derek's friend who'd started everything with his kept woman comment, at a different charity event. He approached me hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable. "Claire, I owe you an apology," he said. "I said something incredibly stupid and hurtful that night. I had no idea about your role in the company, but that's not an excuse. I shouldn't have said what I said regardless." "You're right, you shouldn't have," I agreed. "But in a way, I'm grateful. You said out loud what people had been thinking, what Derek had been enabling them to think. You gave me the push I needed to stop accepting a false narrative." "Still, I'm sorry," Marcus insisted. "For what it's worth, what you've built is incredible. What you're doing now, being open about your role, it's important." "Thank you," I said. "And Marcus? Maybe next time you meet a seemingly decorative wife at a party, consider that there might be more to her story than you assume." He had the grace to look ashamed. Lesson learned. A year after that night at the Pemberton Hotel, Hartwell Technologies went public. The IPO was hugely successful, valuing the company at $800 million. I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, Sandra beside me, my father in the gallery beaming with pride. The press coverage was extensive, and this time, the story was accurate. Claire Hartwell, founder and chairman of Hartwell Technologies, had built a tech empire that was changing how companies approached cybersecurity. Standing on the floor of the stock exchange, watching the numbers tick upward on the screen, I thought about that moment in the hotel ballroom. The humiliation, the anger, the decision to stop making myself small. It had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But it had also been necessary. I'd learned that silence is complicity in your own erasure. That love doesn't require self-diminishment. That partnership means truly sharing success, not one person claiming it while the other watches from the sidelines. I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it destroys what you thought you were building, even when it means standing alone. But I wasn't standing alone, I realized, looking around at Sandra, at my executive team, at my employees who'd embraced the change and the honesty. I was standing with people who saw me, really saw me, for who I was and what I'd built. That was worth more than any amount of money or success. Before we wrap up this story, take just a second to click that subscribe button. You've made it this far, and we'd love to have you as part of our community as we grow toward 1,000 subscribers. Your support truly matters. Derek sent me a message on the day of the IPO. Just 3 words: "Congratulations. You earned it." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He'd finally acknowledged the truth, but it no longer mattered what he thought or said or believed. I'd moved on, built something even bigger, surrounded myself with people who valued honesty and real partnership. That night, I celebrated with my team, with my father, with the friends who'd supported me through the divorce and the transition. We toasted to Hartwell Technologies, to success earned and honestly claimed, to truth finally being told. And when I went home to my penthouse, the one I'd kept in my own name, filled with things I'd chosen and paid for myself, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, completely, authentically, unapologetically myself. Not Derek's wife, not a kept woman, not a good luck charm or decorative accessory. Just Claire Hartwell, founder and chairman of an $800 million company, woman who'd been erased and had refused to stay invisible, entrepreneur who'd reclaimed her own story. It hadn't been easy. It had been messy and public and painful in ways I was still processing. But it had been worth it. Every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable revelation, every moment of standing in truth rather than comfortable fiction had been worth it. Because at the end of the day, success means nothing if you can't claim it honestly. Love means nothing if it requires you to be less than who you are. And partnership means nothing if one person takes all the credit while the other disappears. I'd learned those lessons the hard way, but I'd learned them thoroughly. And now, standing in my own space, running my own company, living my own truth, I was finally, genuinely free. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had spent years trying to make people believe he'd built an empire. In trying to erase me, in forcing me to choose between silence and truth, he'd inadvertently guaranteed that my story would be told louder and clearer than any press release could have managed. He'd wanted to be remembered as the genius behind Hartwell Technologies. Instead, he'd become a cautionary tale about ego and erasure, while I became the face of women reclaiming their rightful place in their own success stories. Sometimes I reflected, the universe has a sense of poetic justice. You just have to be brave enough to let the truth unfold, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Because what you get in return, your authentic self and honest success, is worth infinitely more than any comfortable lie. The morning after the IPO celebration, I woke to my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Through bleary eyes, I saw my father's name flashing on the screen. Richard Hartwell didn't call at 6:30 in the morning unless it was important.
Dad,
I answered, my voice still thick with sleep. Have you seen the Wall Street Journal? He asked, and I could hear the pride in his voice. Front page, Claire. My daughter on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and this time they got the story right. I smiled, reaching for my tablet. Sure enough, there it was, a full-color photo of me at the stock exchange, headline reading, "The woman behind Hartwell Technologies, how Claire Hartwell built an empire while her husband took the credit." The article was extensive, fair, and most importantly, accurate. It detailed my education, my initial investment, my strategic decisions, and the moment at the charity gala that had changed everything. They interviewed some of your early employees, Dad continued. People who remembered you negotiating contracts, staying up all night to fix problems, making the decisions that saved the company multiple times. Claire, I'm so proud of you. Not just for building this company, but for having the courage to reclaim it. Thanks, Dad, I said softly. I wish I'd done it sooner. You did it when you were ready, he replied. That's what matters. Your mother would have been so proud. My mother had passed away 5 years ago, before the worst of Derek's erasure had begun, but after enough that she'd started asking questions. I remembered her pulling me aside at a family dinner, asking gently why I let Derek speak for me so often, why I'd stopped mentioning my role in the company. I'd brushed off her concerns then, defended Derek, insisted everything was fine. I wish she were here now to see that I'd finally listened to the wisdom she'd tried to impart. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel so you don't miss any updates to this story. We're working hard to build a community of engaged listeners, and your subscription helps us reach that goal of 1,000 subscribers. After hanging up with my father, I scrolled through the rest of my messages. There were hundreds more, but a few stood out. One from Sandra Martinez. Boss, we need to talk about the speaking requests. You've been invited to keynote at 3 major conferences. I think you should say yes. Another from my attorney. Derek's lawyer called. He's requesting a meeting. Says it's not about the divorce settlement. Should I set it up? I was curious about what Derek could possibly want. Our divorce had been finalized for months. His termination settlement had been processed. He'd moved to California. What could he need to discuss? Against my better judgment, I told my attorney to arrange the meeting for later that week. The Hartwell Technologies offices had transformed in the year since I'd publicly taken control. The sterile, masculine aesthetic Derek had insisted on, all steel and black leather and aggressive modernity, had been replaced with something warmer, but no less professional. Natural wood, plants, comfortable seating areas where employees could collaborate. The executive floor, where Derek's enormous corner office had dominated, now housed a state-of-the-art innovation lab that any employee could book for projects. I'd moved my own office to a smaller space with better light, surrounded by my team rather than isolated in some tower of power. Leadership, I'd learned, wasn't about having the biggest office or the most impressive title. It was about being accessible, present, genuinely invested in the success of everyone around you. Ms. Hartwell, you have a visitor in conference room B, my assistant James informed me on Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Pemberton has arrived. I'd been preparing for this meeting for days, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was preparing for. I dressed carefully that morning in a slate gray suit, professional armor. My hair was pulled back, my makeup minimal. I wanted to project confidence and control, wanted Derek to see clearly what he'd lost. He was standing by the window when I entered, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He'd lost weight, I noticed. His expensive suit hung a bit loosely on his frame, and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. When he turned to face me, I saw something in his expression I'd never seen during our marriage. Genuine humility. "Claire," he said, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Derek," I replied, deliberately keeping my tone neutral. "My attorney said this wasn't about the settlement?" "No, the settlement is fair. More than fair, actually, given what I did." He gestured to the chairs around the conference table. "Can we sit?" I remained standing. "I have another meeting in 20 minutes. Whatever you need to say, say it." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I've been in therapy. Since the divorce. My therapist suggested I needed to take accountability, make amends where possible. I know I can't undo what I did or how I treated you. But I wanted to apologize, really apologize for all of it." "You sent me a congratulations text after the IPO," I pointed out. "I assumed that was your version of an apology." "That was cowardice," Derek said bluntly. "I couldn't face you then. I was still processing everything, still making excuses in my head. But I've spent the last few months really examining my behavior, and Claire, I was awful to you. Not just the embezzlement or the affair, though those were bad enough. The way I erased you, the way I claimed your work as mine, the way I laughed when someone called you a kept woman. That was unforgivable." I studied him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But he seemed sincere, his body language open, his eyes meeting mine without the defensive arrogance that had characterized our last years together. If you're enjoying this journey, hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything to this channel. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come here, risk seeing me, when you could have just sent a letter or an email?" "Because you deserved better than a letter," Derek replied. "You deserve to hear me say, face to face, that I was wrong, that I took advantage of your love and your generosity, that I let my ego destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. You built something incredible, Claire. You always were the brilliant one, the strategic one, the real entrepreneur. I was just the technical guy you gave a chance to. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself otherwise. I convinced myself I deserved the credit, that I'd earned it through my work, that your contributions were less important because they happened before the company became successful." "You realize that makes no sense," I said. "Without those initial contributions, without my funding and strategy and connections, there would have been no company to become successful." "I know," Derek said quietly. "I know that now. I don't know how I convinced myself otherwise. Pride, probably. Insecurity. I came from nothing, and you came from the Hartwell family. I think part of me needed to believe I'd done it myself, that I wasn't just some guy who married rich and lucked into success. But that insecurity doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it." I walked to the window, looking out at the same skyline Derek had been contemplating when I arrived. From here, you could see the entire city, millions of people pursuing their own ambitions, building their own empires, fighting their own battles. Somewhere out there, other women were probably having their accomplishments erased, their contributions minimized, their stories rewritten by men who couldn't handle sharing credit. "What do you want from me, Derek?" I asked, not turning around. "Forgiveness? Absolution? Permission to stop feeling guilty?" "I don't deserve any of those things," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now. I see what I did, how I hurt you, what I destroyed. And I wanted you to know that you were right to leave, right to take control of your company, right to tell the truth publicly even though it humiliated me. I needed that humiliation. I needed to lose everything to understand what I'd had." I turned back to face him. "You didn't lose everything. You kept your equity. You're still a millionaire. You have a good job in California. You'll be fine." "I lost you," Derek said simply. "I lost someone who believed in me before anyone else did. Someone who saw potential in my ideas and had the resources and intelligence to make them reality. Someone who loved me enough to let me shine even when it meant stepping into the shadows. I didn't just lose a wife, Claire. I lost my partner, my champion, the person who made everything possible. That's what I lost. Despite everything, despite the anger and hurt and betrayal, I felt a twinge of sadness. Not for us, not for the marriage that was irretrievably over, but for what could have been if Derek had been secure enough to share success, if he'd valued partnership over ego, if he'd remembered that we were supposed to be building something together. I appreciate you coming here, I said finally. I appreciate the apology. But Derek, I need you to understand something. I'm not holding on to anger or bitterness.
I've moved on.
I'm happy, genuinely happy, in a way I wasn't for the last several years of our marriage. So your apology, while noted, doesn't change anything for me. I don't need it to find closure or peace. I already have those things. He nodded slowly. I understand. This was more for me than for you. Selfish, probably, but my therapist said I needed to take this step. Then I hope it helps, I said sincerely. I hope you figure out who you want to be, Derek. You're talented. You're smart. You just need to learn to be those things without diminishing someone else. I'm trying, he said. It's harder than I expected, building something that's genuinely mine. I never realized how much I relied on you, not just financially but strategically, emotionally, all of it. I'm learning, though, slowly. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We're building something special here, and every subscriber helps us continue creating content that matters. There was a knock on the conference room door. James peeked in apologetically. Ms. Hartwell, your 2 o'clock is here. Thank you, James. I'll be right there. I looked back at Derek. I have to go. I hope things work out for you in California. Claire, wait, he said as I moved toward the door. One more thing. I know this doesn't make up for anything, but I want you to know that every time someone asks me about Hartwell Technologies, I tell them the truth now. I tell them you founded it, funded it, built it. I tell them I was an employee who got too big for his britches and lost sight of reality. I know it doesn't undo the years of lies, but I'm trying to correct the record wherever I can. I paused, hand on the doorknob. That actually does mean something, I admitted. Thank you for that. It's the least I can do, Derek said. Literally the least. I left him standing in the conference room, looking smaller somehow despite his height, diminished not by age or weight loss, but by accountability. There was something almost sympathetic about him now, stripped of his bravado and forced to confront his own failures. But that sympathy was distant, intellectual rather than emotional. He was no longer my problem to solve or fix or support. My 2 o'clock meeting was with a venture capital firm interested in investing in women-led tech companies. They wanted advice on identifying promising startups and avoiding the kind of erasure that had happened to me. I spent an hour talking about red flags, about the importance of clear ownership documentation, about teaching women entrepreneurs to insist on credit and visibility from day one. We're seeing it everywhere, the senior partner, a woman named Margaret Chen, said. Brilliant women building companies, then watching their male co-founders get all the press, all the recognition. Your story has started a conversation we should have been having decades ago. It shouldn't have taken my story, I replied. There have been women experiencing this for as long as there have been businesses. We just haven't been loud enough about it. Well, you're certainly being loud now, Margaret said with a smile. 3 conference keynotes? When do you sleep? I'll sleep when we've fixed the systemic issues, I said, only half joking. Besides, if my experience can help other women avoid the same mistakes I made, if it can help them insist on proper credit and compensation and recognition from the beginning, then the speaking engagements are worth it. The conferences were in Boston, San Francisco, and London, all within a 6-week span. Sandra had been right to push me to accept them. Each one was an opportunity to tell my story, but more importantly, to amplify the stories of other women who'd been erased or overlooked. I made sure to share the stage when possible, to highlight other female entrepreneurs, to use my platform to elevate others rather than claim all the spotlight for myself. It was what partnership should have looked like in my marriage, I realized. Mutual elevation, shared success, genuine collaboration where both parties benefited and received recognition. Derek, and I could have had that if he'd been secure enough to allow it. The Boston conference was focused on women in technology. I gave my keynote to an audience of 1,500, telling the story of that night at the charity gala, the decision to reclaim my narrative, the aftermath and growth. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes, and afterward, dozens of women approached me with their own stories. A software engineer whose male colleague had presented her code as his own and received a promotion. A product manager whose ideas were routinely attributed to her male supervisor. A founder whose co-founder had gradually pushed her out of the company she'd started. Over and over. Variations on the same theme. Women doing the work, men taking the credit, systems that reinforced and rewarded that dynamic. "What did you do?" each woman asked. "How did you fix it?" I told the truth, I said to each one. Loudly, publicly, with documentation to back it up. I stopped being polite and started being honest. And yes, it cost me my marriage and it was messy and uncomfortable, but I got my life back. I got my identity back. And that was worth everything. Don't forget to subscribe before we continue. Your subscription helps us grow and create more compelling content like this. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. The San Francisco conference was more technical, focused on cybersecurity specifically. Here, I talked less about gender dynamics and more about the actual innovations Hartwell Technologies had pioneered, the technical decisions that had made us industry leaders, the future of security in an increasingly digital world. It felt good to be recognized for my technical and business acumen rather than just my personal drama, though I knew the two were inseparably linked in the public consciousness. During the Q&A, a young man raised his hand. "Ms. Hartwell, do you think you would have had to publicly reclaim your company if you'd been a man? Or would the assumption have been that you were the founder all along?" It was a good question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly. "Honestly, I think gender played a huge role," I said. People saw a husband and wife team and automatically assumed the man was the entrepreneur and the woman was the supportive spouse. It's a bias so ingrained that even I fell into it, letting Derek be the public face because that's what felt comfortable and expected. But that bias only works if we let it. Now I make sure every article, every interview, every public appearance makes crystal clear who founded and built this company. "What advice would you give to men who want to be better allies?" Another audience member asked. "Check your assumptions," I said. If your wife or girlfriend or female colleague is successful, don't assume she got there through luck or connections or by riding someone else's coattails. Assume she got there through talent and hard work unless proven otherwise. Amplify women's contributions instead of talking over them. Give credit explicitly and often. And if you're in a partnership, romantic or professional, make sure it's actually a partnership, not one person doing the work while the other takes the glory. The London conference was the largest and most international. Women entrepreneurs from 30 countries attended, sharing stories that transcended language and culture. The erasure of women's contributions, apparently, was a universal experience. A woman from Tokyo described watching her male business partner give interviews in which he never mentioned her name. A woman from Berlin talked about investors who refused to take meetings with her, insisting on speaking with her male co-founder instead. A woman from Sao Paulo recounted how business journalists consistently photographed her standing behind her male partner, literally placing him in the foreground. We spent hours swapping stories, strategizing solutions, building networks of support. By the end of the conference, we'd formed what we half-jokingly called the Coalition of Erased Entrepreneurs, a network committed to amplifying each other's work and holding systems accountable for their biases. Flying home from London, exhausted but energized, I reflected on how much had changed in 18 months. I'd gone from being Claire Pemberton, decorative wife and good luck charm, to Claire Hartwell, CEO and founder and keynote speaker and accidental activist. The transformation had been painful but necessary, destructive but ultimately creative. My phone buzzed with a message from Sandra. "Check the latest quarterly report. Revenue up 35%. Employee satisfaction scores at an all-time high. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." What I was doing, I realized, was finally being myself. Leading authentically, making decisions based on sound business strategy rather than ego or appearance, surrounding myself with talented people, and actually giving them credit for their work. It seemed almost revolutionary, though it should have been basic common sense. The Hartwell Technologies holiday party that December was different from any we'd thrown during Derek's tenure. Instead of an exclusive event at an expensive venue designed to impress clients and competitors, we rented out a museum and invited every employee plus their families. Instead of catered cuisine that prioritized presentation over taste, we hired food trucks representing cuisines from around the world. Instead of a formal program with speeches and awards, we set up activity stations where kids could learn about coding and robotics while adults networked and celebrated. If you've made it this far in the story, you're clearly invested. Show your support by subscribing to our channel. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and you could be the one who helps us reach that goal. I walked through the party, watching my employees relax and enjoy themselves, watching their kids' faces light up at the interactive exhibits, watching genuine community form. This, I thought, was what success should look like. Not one person at the top claiming all the glory, but hundreds of people contributing their talents and sharing in the rewards. "You look happy," Sandra said, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of wine. Really happy, not just politely smiling for the camera's happy. "I am happy," I confirmed, accepting the wine. "This feels right. Like we're building something that matters, something sustainable, something real." "We are," Sandra agreed. "And Claire, I want you to know how much I appreciate what you've done here. Not just giving me this opportunity, but creating a culture where people are valued for their actual contributions. Half my executive team is women. That's not because we have quotas or diversity initiatives. It's because we hire and promote based on talent, and it turns out women are pretty talented when you actually give them a chance." "Revolutionary concept," I said dryly. "You'd think," Sandra replied. "But you'd be surprised how many companies still struggle with it. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised at all." I watched James, my assistant, dancing with his husband near the jazz band we'd hired. I watched Jennifer Chin, the developer who'd asked me why I'd stayed silent, teaching a group of children how to code a simple game. I watched Margaret from accounting laughing with her teenage daughter, both of them wearing Hartwell Technologies t-shirts we'd made for the event. This was my legacy, I realized. Not just the company or the valuation or the stock price. This was it, a workplace where people were valued, recognized, allowed to bring their whole selves and have their contributions acknowledged. A company where talent mattered more than gender or connections, or who could claim credit loudest. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the photos from your holiday party. Looks amazing. You've built something special. D. Derek." Still paying attention, still commenting, still somehow inserting himself into my narrative. I deleted the message without responding. He didn't get to do that anymore, didn't get to offer commentary on my life or my company. I'd moved on, and it was time he did too. "Everything okay?" Sandra asked, noticing my expression.